Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Interactive Lessons. I hope everyone's staying nice and cool at home and keeping out of this heat. So today we're going to go ahead and go over some tools that you can use to make lessons more engaging for your students in a virtual classroom. The slide deck we'll be using today, you may want to have access to it as there's several links on there. You can find access to this slide deck by going to the web address in the bottom of this slide. It's bit.ly/interactivepusd. You'll need to make sure that you're accessing this from a web browser where you're logged into your Poway email address. If you are on your personal email address, you will be blocked from this slide deck. Make sure also that the web address is all lowercase, as it is a case-sensitive web address. All right, a few things to go over before we get started. This is a 1-hour training that includes our webinar presentation, time for questions, and work time for the remainder of that hour. For questions during the webinar regarding today's topic, please use the chat feature. We want to make sure that we're staying on topic with the tools that we're discussing today. If you have questions about any other tools or something personal to you, please make sure you wait until the very end or send an email to edtech@powayusd.com. We want to make sure that we keep today's chat focused on the tools that we're focusing on. Also, please allow 48 hours for the recording of this session to be posted via the Canva link where you have that professional development catalog. We want to make sure we're recording this for people who cannot attend, and also if you want to go back and watch this again. Lastly, we have tons of resources for you at the PUSD Digital Teaching Resources site. You can click right there in this slide to get to that website. It is the same website we used in the spring to provide lots of teaching resources, and we'll continue to update that as we move along in the school year.
Just to clarify really quickly, right now, Lauren is sharing her screen. So the links that you'll see on your screen will not be live. You will not be able to click on them. So in order to get access to those live links that she's sharing, if you go to the bit.ly, it was on the first slide as well as I put it in the chat, and click on that, those will become live for you. I see Lauren's also copying a few of them and just putting them in the chat, so you'll also have access to them that way if you didn't have time to pull up the slide deck.
Thank you, Amy. All right, our agenda today, we're going to go ahead and start with our first tool, which is PairDeck. Then we're going to go ahead into Nearpod, and then we'll finish with some different whiteboard tools you might use when you're doing your virtual lessons. We'll spend the remainder of the time with questions and answers and time for work. All right, before we jump into that first tool, there are just 2 words we want to share with you and go over with. There are 2 ways we can use video for student learning, and that's synchronous and asynchronous. With synchronous learning, students learn at the same time. So communication happens in real time. It can be more engaging because the teacher and students are there together learning at the same time. And then it also allows for instant feedback and clarification. So for example, you might be going along in a PairDeck presentation, which we'll show you in a minute, and students are following along with you in a live session. Asynchronous is when students learn at different times. This can also be called self-paced or playlist on your own. So the communication is not live here. There might be a back channel or open office hours, but students are really kind of going at their own pace, and it can be more convenient and flexible. It allows students to really find the right pace that's for them. So this might be, again, something like slides where they're going along with it on their own and engaging activities in a way that best fits them. So when it comes to these 2, some people always ask, what's the best way to do this? And there really is no right or wrong answer here. It's finding that balance between live instruction and self-paced learning, between synchronous and asynchronous. And it's really, you have to think about your content, you have to think about your teaching style, you have to think about your students. and what works best for you. And there isn't really a wrong or right answer there. It's just finding that fit. Again, we want to make sure it's balanced for students. They have that live connection, but also time for self-paced learning. All right. We're going to go ahead and jump into our first tool, which is PairDeck. This is one of my personal favorite tools. I've been using it since it started quite some time ago, and it has come a long way since then and continues to develop. PairDeck is a Google Slide add-on, so it works with Google Slides and enhances that. So if you're a teacher that already has lots of your lessons in Google Slides, this is a great tool for you to kind of make that next step. So it allows you to embed questions, polling, formative assessment right within the slides for students to answer. For teachers to get this add-on, and it's not an extension, it's a little bit different than that, but it's similar. You can click this link in the slide deck, or you can just Google PairDeck add-on. And now mine says uninstall, but yours would say install. Once you have it installed and you go open any Google Slide presentation, you'll see at the very top, it says add-ons. You're going to go to add-ons and go ahead and click open PairDeck add-on. And there you are, your tool's open already. So it's quick and easy to find. And it's right there on the sidebar on the right. So students don't need anything installed. They just need their Google ID. That is a setting within here that I recommend you keep on. Require student using their emails, and that's their kind of pseudo emails, the @stu.powayusd.com. So it doesn't really require them to make an account or install anything, but it will require them to click their name with their Google ID in there. Students respond anonymously to these questions, so they can't see another student's answers. But a teacher can see that once the session has ended, and I'll walk us through all of that. After the lesson, the teacher can also save the responses. So if you want to use this as a form of grading or look back on how students did in previous lessons, you can always save this because the responses automatically save to Google Sheets. Also, there are two options, that teacher-led, so that live lesson, and then student-paced. They can work on it on their own. Any questions so far, Amy?
Nope, we are good. Just one thing to clarify, everything that Lauren and I are sharing with you today will all be what we call freemium features. So they are all the free features that are offered within PairDeck, Nearpod, as well as the 2 whiteboard options that we'll go over.
Thanks, Amy. All right. So we'll start here on the right with the question types, and we're going to practice doing a question together. There are 4 question types here that are free and 2 that are paid. You can see they have stars by them. The 4 question types that are allowed are text, so open-ended questions, multiple choice, number response, or a link to or embedded website. So you can see on this slide here, I already wrote a question. Have you heard of PairDeck before? It's a good idea with younger learners, if you're, especially those that are not fluent readers yet. If you add in images here, you can make 4 images as choices in multiple choice. There's tons of different types of ways you can write that question on the slide. When I'm ready to make that slide interactive, I simply choose the type of question I'd like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and hit multiple choice here. And I'm going to insert my options. Say yes, no, maybe. Click update slide. And automatically this bar popped down here. And it tells me what type of question I put in there. Students choose an option, and I see the ABC in this corner, letting me know that I made this a multiple choice slide in case I look on it after I've done it, that I forget maybe what I put in there. Again, it says it in the notes at the bottom of the slide. This is a PairDeck multiple choice slide. Your current options are A, yes, B, no, C, maybe. There's something else that I can also add onto this slide besides a question type, and this is one of my favorite things to meet different special needs or to grant access to our youngest learners who are not fluent readers yet, is to add audio to the slide. So to add audio to the slide, you simply click that button. You can upload something that you've recorded in the past. Maybe you want them to listen to a speech, or you want them to listen to a countdown timer, or even just music, or you can record your own voice. So I'm going to go ahead and record myself reading this question. Have you heard of PairDeck before? Click Save, add audio to slide. And now I have this audio feature on my top right corner there, letting the student know that audio is included in this slide. So I've enhanced this question in two ways. I made it interactive where students can actually give their answer. And I also added in myself reading that question. There is not a limit to how many questions you can do in a slide deck. So the next thing I would do is when I'm ready to share this with students, I would go up to the top and hit Start Lesson. Now again, here are my two choices. Do I want it student-paced or do I want it instructor-paced? For today's demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and hit instructor-paced. Automatically, another tab in my web browser opened up. So I have my original slides here and now my presentation session up here.
Lauren, I have two questions for you. When you add audio to the slide, will it play automatically for students or do they need to click on it?
They do need to click on it, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second.
Okay, and then just while you're going along, if you get a chance to show how students would add emojis for their answer choice, and then of course reviewing how you might use this as a Canvas assignment.
Emojis and Canvas. Okay, we will get to those. All right, so this is my, thank you, Amy. I'll get to those in just a second. This is my view of the presentation so far. There are two ways that students, oh, and I already see we have people in there. There are two ways that students can enter my PairDeck presentation. The first way is to go to joinpd.com, and that never changes no matter what you're doing. It's the code that changes. So you could go to joinpd.com, and I would just enter that code there. Another way to do this is to give students a direct link where they don't have to enter that code. So let's say you're in your Canvas classroom and you just want them to click right on the link and get started. They can just paste that link there and they're automatically in. Now this is a setting you can turn off and on the student view. It will always ask them, how are you feeling today? So a little SEL check-in before your lesson. Students always have the option to skip, and you always have the option to turn off this question. So from my teacher view, and I'm going to be toggling back and forth, from my teacher view, I can see I have 23 students in there. Thank you everyone for jumping in. When I'm ready and I have everyone in, I'm going to go ahead and hit Start Class. Now again, if I had chosen the self-paced version, students could get started right away. However, I've chosen the live version. So as I move my slides, the slides will move with the students. So I'm going to go ahead to slide 3. I switch to the student view. That's also on slide 3. I'm going to go ahead and advance us to the slide where we put in that question. Now looking on the student view, they have the option to answer the question on the side and to listen to the question in the bottom right corner. So it's just simply modeling for students in the beginning when they're getting used to the tool, that when they see this headphone feature in the top right corner, they can know to go down to the bottom right corner and listen to it. They just click play. Have you heard of PairDeck before? They can adjust the volume and then choose their answer. You cannot record your voice in the multiple choice. That's why I mentioned before that it is a good idea to put pictures in. Maybe if you're A, B, C, and D, and you put pictures along with that, and then they can click the corresponding letter.
Hey, Lauren, I have just a few things to touch on. The first is when the students respond with "How's your day going?" where would that report show up for the teacher?
So the teacher would not be able to see that live right away. That's actually a paid feature. So the teacher can't see answers until the very end of this.
But once it's finished, they will see those answers.
Yes, once that's finished, they will see all those answers.
Okay. And then one thing I would recommend, I see some questions in the chat about using Zoom and PairDeck and how you would use that at the same time. So one thing you're going to want to teach your students sort of right at the beginning of the year, especially for those students who are at the younger grades, would be to show them how to access a link that you put in the chat and open up that link and still be on Zoom so they can multitask. So that would definitely be a skill that I'd recommend. This way that you can have, you can see your students, what they're doing as they're going through the Nearpod lesson with you, and they're still interacting with the Nearpod or PairDeck. Sorry about that. Using PairDeck or Nearpod, you can still see and get the results as they're moving along, and they're live with you on Zoom. And no, you do not need to teach them to split their screen. They can have a different site opened and click on Zoom, and it will just show up in the corner. The picture will show up for them.
Another way to go about that is also, if you're doing the live lesson, what you can do is do your live lesson, but then put the PairDeck question in a separate link, in a separate Google slide presentation. So maybe I would just copy this slide with the question on it into another presentation and just share that with students when I'm ready. So they'd be following along in my presentation in the Zoom view, but then when I want them to answer a question, then they would click that link, answer that question, and then come back to my slide deck. I hope I explained that well. It's just that kind of personal preference of, do you want students following along with you on Zoom, or do you want them following along on their own screen? All right, any more questions before I move on, Amy?
I think we're good so far.
Okay, awesome. All right, so after you answer, the students answer the questions, I can see on my end that how many of the students here responded. And I can see the responses, the totals, but I cannot see who responded to what until I end the session. A couple features with this, I can lock the screen. So when I click lock screen, you cannot change your answer or give another answer. Another thing I can do is turn on self-paced. So maybe I want students to stick with me in the beginning of the lesson and then finish the rest at their own pace. I can do that here. And once I turn on self-paced, then I can really view of who put what, who said yes, who said no, who said maybe. So that's one way to get those answers quickly about who said what. When I'm done with the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and hit end. I'm going to name the session. So maybe it's the math lesson 20. Save and end session. Now, once I went back in my PairDeck account, I could see who responded to what. Students get a feedback question, and then they're out of that slide deck. So a couple more things to add about PairDeck. Let me go ahead and open PairDeck again for us. Oh, and I'm sorry, Amy, you asked about the emojis in there. The students would have to have the emoji keyboard enabled, but if they right click when they're responding on an open-ended question, if they couldn't do it in multiple choice, but if they were doing it in open-ended, if they have their emoji keyboard enabled, they could just right click on the text and click emojis and symbols, and they should be able to get that in there.
So there's a few questions in the chat that I just want to touch on. If I was using this in a high school or middle school classroom where I had several periods going through the same slide deck, I would actually make a copy per period, because then it would separate the data for me. So I would know these are my period 1 students. Here's all their responses organized in my report. Here's my period 2 students, all organized. And all you need to do then is, when you're in here, just go to the file, make a copy. And I'll show you as well how to do that within Nearpod. If students are absent that day and you want to share the slide deck with them with PairDeck, you can go to the asynchronous learning and provide them with the student paste link.
Thanks, Amy. All right, there's one more feature of PairDeck which I'd like to share with you. That's a template library, and it's on the top of the add-on. And if you know you want to add in questions, but you're not exactly sure what you want to ask or how you want to ask it, you can search here, and they have pre-made ones for you. So maybe I want a warm-up question. Maybe I want an end of the lesson question. There are some pre-built ones that you can modify and change the wording of so it fits your lesson. You can also search by subject area. They have some social emotional in there. And again, you can modify all of these. Now, some of the questions include the premium feature, so you just have to make sure that you're choosing the questions that have the free question types, which are these 4 up here. And lastly, I know there was a question about Canvas. There is currently not a integration with Canvas. And when I say that, it means they don't necessarily talk to each other, and I can't just click a button and PairDeck is in there. However, they can work well together. So if I wanted to have my students access this PairDeck in let's say a self-paced manner through Canvas, I would simply go up here to start lesson, click self-paced, and I would copy this link here. I would then paste that link in either my assignment or the page or my homepage, wherever I want students to click on it from. But it would not be something that was actually embedded in that page. So you could click on the link and they could work through it on their own. All right, so that's that intro to PairDeck. It's a great tool, and I just want to give a little disclaimer. Like many tools out there right now, they're changing their free and paid versions quite often. So while we presented on many of the free tools today, some of the paid tools might become free and vice versa. So please just, as you make your account and things change, please just keep that in mind. Before we move on to Nearpod, are there any other questions about PairDeck?
I think we are good so far. So again, if we were not able to get to your question in the chat, if it got lost in there, please go ahead and just repost that into the chat and we can answer it as soon as that pops up. All right, we are going to now move on and talk about Nearpod. So as you'll see when we go through and talk about Nearpod and PairDeck are pretty similar. There are a few differences that we'll point out as we go along, and you'll see that with the structure and features that we'll go through. So when we look at Nearpod, teachers can install Nearpod as an add-on, so just like you did with PairDeck, or you can create within Nearpod, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, students do not need to install anything in order to access your lessons that you do within Nearpod. And students can respond anonymously to these questions within the slides. So you can hide their names so that other students don't know what their responses were, and you can choose not to hide their name. So if it was something else where you wanted their name connected to their response, you could choose to show their name as well. Just depends on, again, how you're using this in your classroom. The teacher, though, can always see, again, what the students and how they've responded. You can do these lessons live in Zoom, or you can send out a student-paced code to your students, and then it will show up in your reports, their answers to their questions, how they did on the matching, or whatever other activities you have integrated within your Nearpod lesson. So as I mentioned, there's 3 avenues for creating a Nearpod lesson. You can create a brand new lesson from scratch, so a brand new slide deck within Nearpod. You can use it at an add-on, or you can use existing lessons that are in the Nearpod library and edit them. Okay? So if I was going to use Nearpod as an add-on, I would do it the same way that Lauren showed you within PairDeck. I would go to my add-ons. I'm going to click Nearpod, and it's going to open on the side of my screen. So here are my features that I can add to my slide deck. Again, some of these are similar to what is offered within PairDeck, and some are different. So I can add the audio piece, video. I can add a collaboration board. So those of you with a Canvas background, think of it as a discussion board. I can use the Draw It tool. I can have them take virtual 3D field trips. So they have those VR field trips that you can embed within it. So if I'm studying Egypt, I want them to go and see what Egypt would look like. I can add that by clicking here on my field trip button. It will show me, I can search the destinations, click on it, and then embed that within my slide deck. I have a fill in the blank option. I can also embed Flipgrid. So if I was doing the lesson and wanted students to be able to provide video responses and then collaborate or engage with one another, I could embed that within my Nearpod lesson. Matching pairs, memory test, Nearpod 3D, and this is something that I think is a great feature they have, where if I was studying, let's say, different types of systems, I could put in this 3D image of the cardiovascular system for students really to see what that looks like. Okay. Open-ended questions, PDF viewer, polls, quizzes, other simulations. I can also embed another slide deck. So if I wanted one slide to link to an additional slide deck on another topic, I could do that here as well. It can embed with Sway, which is a Microsoft tool. This is a new one that they added. It's called Time to Climb. I want you to think of, it always reminds me of if you've ever been to the fair when you play the horse racing game and you roll the ball and something moves. It's similar to that, where students are racing and answering questions as quickly as they can to get to the top of the hill. You can embed videos. So if I had a video on YouTube or I had made a screencast, I can embed it within my Nearpod. And of course, I can then add web content. So I know I just went really quickly over those features. Again, a lot of them are similar to ones that are offered in PairDeck. Again, when you add these, it will give you the reports at the end, which I will show you how to do. If you use the Nearpod as an add-on within your Google Slides, you're going to want to make sure that you click, there we go, to save and go to Nearpod. So when you click save and go to Nearpod, it will add all of the additions you've made into your Nearpod library. So this is what your Nearpod library, once you sign up, will look like. Mine has some content in there, as you can see. So these are different Nearpod lessons that I have in here. So if I wanted to build a lesson from scratch in Nearpod rather than using one I've already made, I can go ahead and click on and select lesson in Nearpod, and here's where all of those features will come up of things that I can embed, as well as activities that I can embed for my students to answer. If you have files, you can also drag and drop and upload those files within Nearpod. I'll go back to the screen. So those are the 2 ways that you can create slide decks using Nearpod. Another way is if I go into my Nearpod library, this will give me access to some free lessons that others have made. Of course, there are lessons in here that you can choose to pay for, but there are great ones that are free. So I just click on lessons. I can go by the standard if I would like, or I can go by subject area and grade level, filter it that way. So if I wanted to use one of these lessons, I can preview the lesson to see what it looks like. If I said, oh, this lesson is great, I want to add it to my library, I just click Add to Library, and then it will show up in my library for me. So if I go back into my library now, so here's my library, here's this lesson that I just saved. Well, I realized I like the lesson, but I really want to make some modifications. I can go in here and I can click this Edit button, and I can edit the lesson directly, even though somebody else has made it. So again, because it is in my library, that's why I'm able to do this. So maybe I'm doing this and I said, okay, I want to add an activity here where students have a matching pairs. I can click on it and I can add my content into this lesson. I can also delete. So maybe I said, okay, my students don't need to see this slideshow. I just click on it and then click delete slide. When I'm done, I would just hit save and exit, and this new modified lesson would be in my library. With the free version, you get 100 megabytes of storage, which sounds like a lot, but once you start embedding videos, that storage fills up very, very quickly. My recommendation is to make your slide decks always within Google Slides, pull them over once you've added the Nearpod features that you would like, and then keep them in your library. If your library fills up, then you'll just need to delete some of the Nearpod lessons that you have added into your library because of storage, okay? When you're in here again and you're looking at your lessons, it will give you 3 different options for how to share these with students. So they have a beta form now with live participation in Zoom, where when I click this, it will connect with Zoom and it will allow me to schedule it this way. Let me get out of here. And again, that's in beta form. So as Lauren has said, many things keep changing. So hopefully that will stay there, because that's a nice feature to have where you can schedule it and do it in Zoom with your students. The next piece is the live participation. Again, this will allow you to do synchronous learning with your students, where you're sharing controlling the screen and they're participating, and you can see the live breakdown of reports and adjust your instruction as needed, right? If I have a fill in the blank on a certain point in my lesson and I'm realizing that my students really did not do well on it, I can shift my instruction based on the information I'm getting. So this is one of the great features of Nearpod. Lauren, is there a question?
Yes, so can you just go over again uploading the Google Slides? Is there a limit on that?
Again, it's the 100 megabytes. So it all depends on the storage. So you may have 5 slide decks, but they're really big. And so they take up a lot of your storage. So you get to that capacity quickly, where others may have 15 in there that aren't as big. So it all comes down to storage. Any other things you want me to go over?
So I just want to go over this. There's many questions about the live instruction with, if you, both for Nearpod and PairDeck, if you choose live instruction, your students will see on one side of the screen whatever it is you're broadcasting. So if you're sharing your screen, they're going to see it twice. They'll see whatever it is you're presenting, and they'll see it on their side. So a better use of this would be to have them pull up that deck, PairDeck or Nearpod lesson on one side of their screen from the link, and then on the left side they would see you, the teacher. So you wouldn't actually be sharing the screen with them. You would have on one side the lesson, on the left side you would just kind of be talking through it and moving the slides so that they wouldn't have to change it. They'd only really have to interact with the computer when they needed to answer a question or click a link. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. There are Google Chromebook resources for students for how to do that and do those splitting screen skills on our PUSD virtual teaching website if you would like to refer to that. And then there are a couple questions about the Nearpod add-on. Do you know, I haven't not used that one in a while. Can you talk about the add-on or the extension, sorry.
The add-on?
Is it an add-on or an extension? I'm not sure.
It's an add-on.
It's an add-on. Okay.
It's an add-on.
Thank you.
So it's similar to just the one with the PairDeck, where you would add it, you'd go to your add-ons here. And this is, you'd go to get add-ons and select Nearpod. And that would put it within in your add-ons.
So we have a question here. If you create the Google Slides using the Nearpod add-on, then save in your Nearpod library, then your library gets full. When you delete from the library, will Nearpod features be retained when you save in your Google Drive? I believe the answer is no.
Unfortunately, they will not.
Good thinking, though. That would have been a nice workaround.
Yes, that would have been an amazing workaround, and I wish it worked. So that's why we're showing you, several different options again, so you can find what works best for you. And if you're comfortable with the both of them, you can kind of go back and forth, because maybe there's features in PairDeck that you really like that Nearpod doesn't offer, and vice versa. So going back to ways to share this with your student, there is a student paste link. So when I click on this, it will, I have to launch a new one because we were just in that one. It will give me the student paste link where I can email it, I can embed it, I can send them a code. It just depends on how you share content with your student. One thing I would suggest making a note of is just be mindful of how many days you're keeping your session live for. So if you know you want this as an extended period, so students, if they're using it for a study guide for something that happened at the very beginning of the year, you're gonna wanna make sure you change the date. So right now it's set 29 days are remaining. So if I knew that they were gonna need it further out, then I'd wanna make sure I changed that so then students will still have access to it, right? So I could make even though we did it live together, on my Canvas page, I could put the self-paced app and say, here's this link. If you need review at any time, they can go back and go through that same lesson self-paced. All right, so the last feature we're gonna go over on Nearpod before we get into the whiteboard features is the Nearpod reports. So even though it gives you that real-time information on how your students answered questions right as you're going from the teacher view, you can also get reports at the end where it will give you specifics and break down all of the additional questions and features that you added. So it will tell you, how did your students do on the open-ended question? How did they do on the matching pairs? What was their score? How did they do on the time to climb? So this gives you that information, and then you can download it so that you can access as a PDF if you needed to and access that data later. So I could say, okay, I did this whole session, and here are my students that I need to target on and pull in small groups because they had difficulty with it. Yes, Lauren.
Thank you. Amy, do you know that with the setting the date, if you set the wrong date, can you reopen it and set it again? I'm not sure about that one.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
I can try that.
This is some good questions.
Why don't I try that right now and see?
Yeah.
So if I go into here, here's when it expires. I'm going to click on it, and yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay,
yes,
great. We learned something new. Thank you.
Yes, always exciting to learn something new.
There's one question I want to answer, and I have Googled this question myself.
Okay.
Is there a PairDeck and Nearpod comparison chart? If you Google PairDeck versus Nearpod, a chart will come up. However, there'll be one for 2013, one for 2014, one through 2015, and so on. And the features change so quickly on both of these tools that there really isn't one that's current. What I suggest you do, because this is the question we always get in this session, is which one should I use? And there's not a wrong or right answer here. It's more thinking about your teaching style, your students' engagement, the content that you're teaching, right? What would it lend itself better to, right? So if I'm using lots of videos and lots of slides and different things, and I think it's going to take up a lot of space, I might just want to be on the safe side and use PairDeck. If I know I want to do that virtual field trip and my students are going to love all those tools, I'll keep it short and put it in Nearpod. So you kind of just have to weigh those pros and cons. For myself, I Of course, I presented on the PairDeck part. That one's my favorite, so I'm a little bit biased. However, I love Google Slides. So I had a lot of my lessons already in Google Slides. So for me, it was just like an easy transition to move over and just slowly add in those interactive questions. And then I kind of started to dabble in Nearpod, but that's not to say that you can't jump right to those Nearpod. There's awesome features in there. So I hope that helps answer the debate a little bit, but feel free to Google it. I'm sure someone out there is making a comparison chart right now.
Yes, and as Lauren said earlier, everything changes so fast in the ed tech world that one day PairDeck may be more highly recommended, and then the next day it's, you know, a few weeks later it's Nearpod. So it kind of just goes back and forth, and it really comes down to a personal preference. Okay, so the next piece we're going to go into, actually, Lauren, before I do that, any other questions on Nearpod?
So we're talking a bit about the paid version here. So you might have noticed in Canvas, you might see some things that say Nearpod on it. The way that Canvas works for our district is that when an individual school site buys something, because not all school sites have the same thing, if a school site decides to buy a tool that integrates with Canvas, we turn that feature on within Canvas because it's been paid for. So it would show up on all school sites, even though only maybe 1 or 2 school sites have bought it. So we can't turn it on for individual schools. So if you're at a school site that purchased Nearpod, that Nearpod integration is going to work for you in Canvas. However, if you're at a school site that does not pay for it and you hit that Nearpod button, it's not going to work for you on there. So just as a little FYI, if you do see it on there, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work or you have a subscription with it. And that goes for many different apps and extensions on Canvas. If you're really interested in this, if you think your team or your grade level might buy it, if you've been hearing different things about what tools you want, this goes for any tool. Just please speak to your administrator. As coaches, we focus on the training side and not so much on the purchasing side. So please just talk to your administrators about different things. There are great tools. We still present on these 2 tools because even as free tools, they can offer so much. So no, to answer the question, it does not work with SpeedGrader unless you have that integration piece. Thanks, Amy.
Right. Yes. So we're going to go on now to Whiteboard Tools, and we're going to show you 2 different tools that are free, of course, that you can use to have interactive whiteboards with your students. So the first tool is called Whiteboard FI, and this is an online whiteboard tool for teachers and classrooms. So I'm going to click on it so you can see, and I'll just take you through how you would use it. So when you go in, you're going to sign in with your PUSD Google account. And all you're going to do is select new class. And it will give you different settings that you can choose. So you can have a waiting room. You can allow students to upload images. It says you can force simple mode. And this is for if you know you have students who maybe have low bandwidth. It slows down that bandwidth usage. So it moves a little slower, but it needs less bandwidth to do so. And then slow mode for students is disables the automatic whiteboard save functionality. And instead of showing a save whiteboard button, the whiteboard will not display or save without saving and manually clicking that button. So those are the settings. So if I was going to create a new class, I'm just going to call this class demo. I'm going to hit create a new class. And here's my class. So if I was doing this via Zoom, I would just copy this link, stick it in the chat box, and have students open their whiteboards. Or I could share the room code with my students, and they could, bookmark this page, go to this page, and then select the room code. So when I go into my whiteboard, this is where if I wanted to make a template for students, I would do this in here. So right now, all students would have a blank whiteboard. On the teacher end, the nice part of this is I am seeing all of my students' whiteboards at one time. So the students are only seeing their individual whiteboards, but I can see all of theirs. So in here is where if I wanted to insert an image, I could go in here, find my image, insert it, and then have students have a conversation around that image. If I wanted to add a math problem, I would come to the bottom, I would insert, go to my math functions, and I could insert my math equations here. Okay, I can write text for students, I could draw pictures, whatever is the feature I'm looking for is probably up here for me to use. I have the drawing mode, the text box, insert images, pictures, and backgrounds. Now, when it comes to sharing this with your students, I'd go down to action. I would push Whiteboard to all students. So this would give them the template and it allow them to interact with the template that I created. Okay. If I then wanted to clear their whiteboards or my own, I'm just going to click clear whiteboards. And then we have that clean feature again. While I'm using this over here, I also have a little coggle that gives me different options. So similar when I signed up, I can enable the waiting room lobby. I can lock the room. Again, I can allow students to upload pictures. And so similar options to when you first came in, but if you forgot to do those, it does give you the option to do it here. The nice thing about a nice feature they have in here too is I can save all whiteboards as a PDF. So I could save the whiteboards for future use, or I could save them and then upload them into student portfolios or other sites that I might be using. So questions, Lauren, on the Whiteboard FI?
I believe I answered this one, but to share it out, there are not pre-made groups that you can make within the website, right? You would have to share it to individual students.
Yes, there are not. However, if you are looking for students to collaborate, I would recommend the next tool that we're going to go on, which is Google Jamboard. So this is the tool I would go to if I wanted all students working on their own whiteboards. I really want that engagement to see what they're doing. I would use this tool. If I was looking for a whiteboard tool that would allow students to collaborate, then I would go to Google Jamboard. So this is Google Jamboard. All you're going to do, again, you're going to sign in with your PUSD Google ID and you're going to click Get Started. And I'm just going to hit the plus sign and I'm going to start a Jamboard. It gives me many of the similar features as it had in Whiteboard FI. I have drawing, I have eraser, I can upload images, I can do text. One feature it has that Whiteboard FI does not is you can allow students to respond via sticky notes. So if I posted a picture in here or a quote and wanted students to respond, I could ask them to add a sticky note to really separate each student's answer from one another's. Now, the thing with Google Jamboard, there's a few pieces. The first one is they switch their numbers. So you can only have 25 students on a single Jamboard at one time. So Whiteboard FI, you can have up to 50 students. On Google Jamboard, you can only have 25 students on one jam at one time. So what I would do is I would make one Jamboard if I wanted students to collaborate and I had more than 25 students. I would make several pages of the same template until 25 students were on one jam. Then I would create another Jamboard and put the other 15 students on that Jamboard. So it's still giving them opportunities to collaborate. You could put them into groups here where you could put their names on the side and say, okay, find the Jamboard where your name is and you're going to collaborate with this group of students. Or you could allow them to self-select their groups, assigning up to 25 only per Jamboard. When you go to share your Jamboard, it's very similar to how you would share a Google Doc or a Google Slide. You're just going to click share and get the link and share the link with your students. So just make sure when you share the link, if you plan on sharing it, make sure that you click that it is their editors, because right now it will go as viewers. So you're going to want to make sure they're editors so they can collaborate on the Jamboard. And if you're using it for collaboration, this is a great time to also talk about the importance of digital citizenship. So being mindful of what you're writing and being respectful of others as they collaborate virtually. Lauren, are there questions on either of those tools? I know we just went over a lot of information at once. So please, again, keep putting those questions in the chat, and Lauren and I will do our best to answer them in the chat or out loud as we go over these tools. I know we have about 9 minutes left, so just to remind you that if questions come up once we're done with this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us at edtech@PowayUSD, and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
So a couple of questions. Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. To sign up for Jamboard, you just simply Google Jamboard app, and you don't even have to sign up. You just be logged into your Google account. I posted some application ideas. If you Google Jamboard lesson ideas, Google has already created some, but I copied and pasted that link into our chat. Let's see some other questions here. If you use your Google account at home, to do these add-ons, will we have them at school also, right? Yes, as long as you are logged into the Chrome web browser under your same email address where you added those add-ons, they will show up no matter where you go. So if I move to another computer, I also have the same bookmarks, add-ons, and extensions as I do on another computer I use, as long as I'm logged into my same Google email address.
Yes, and somebody had asked how many you can have using Whiteboard FI. Whiteboard FI is up to 50, so you could have 50 students in one group at a time. Yes, and Jamboard is a choice. Somebody asked about collaborating. It is a choice like docs, forms, and presentations. It's in your Google suite.
And there was a question earlier, I just want to go back to it, about what does it look like on the teacher end after you end a PairDeck session. I'm going to go ahead and, Amy, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
So this is what it looks like on my end. So I just go to PairDeck.com and I log in, and I can see all my sessions here. Are they active? Are they closed? What were their names? And what was the file name of the slides I was using? And then on the right-hand side, I can view it again. The teacher dashboard is a paid feature. So I would go over here. I can reopen the session, rename it, archive it, or export it to a spreadsheet. When I click export to a spreadsheet, that's where I get the data. So I can see the timestamp, your name, your email address, and your answer. So it is not a full-on breaking it down by percentages or keeping track of your data over time. Those are paid features, but again, I can see your answers right there. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. We're gonna go ahead and stay in the chat for the next couple of minutes. If you feel all set and ready to go, feel free, you can leave our Zoom. If you have questions, feel free to stay in and pop those in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. We really appreciate it. Appreciate all you're doing to get ready for virtual learning. Will the upgraded Zoom have the interactive whiteboard? I do not believe it will be interactive. We are currently working on the educator features, and that information will be shared out in a PD on Zoom for Educators, the paid version, but I do not believe it's interactive. I do not believe Jamboard can be assigned in Canvas through the Google LTI, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yes, I just found a video that's on Jamboard and Canvas that just came out. So I will put it, I have not watched it all yet, but it could give you some ideas on how you could use it within Canvas.
While you're finding that, Amy, just to answer your question, Michelle, yes, PairDecks are all saved in your Google Drive, which is unlimited for teachers. So that is unlimited. That's one pro of PairDeck.